Okay, tutorial number 3, how to create a button. So in this tutorial we're going to be creating a button class. So make sure you have your Dodgeball project open. You've got your timer from the last tutorial and we've still got all our code in our main Dodgeball file. So we're going to go up again to our little arrow and we're going to create new tab. And in this one we're going to call this one button with a capital B. So we've now got button, and as you can see it's put it in alphabetical order, so it's the second tab now. So we're going to go ahead and create a class called button, and we're going to have our open bracket and our closing bracket. So again, everything inside here is going to be our class for button. So for a button, what we're going to need is a few more variables this time. So we're going to need a position, a width and a height to create the actual square for our button. We're going to need a color, so our button has a color. We're going to need a string, which is like text on the button, so we can actually name it something like reset button, start button, pause button. And then we're going to need a couple of booleans, so to know when we press the mouse and when the button's actually being clicked. So we're going to go ahead and create some variables. So we're going to go with a p vector, which is our position, which we're going to go pos, and we're going to make it equal just to a new p vector. So we're just going to initialize that one straight away with our basic coordinates of 0, 0, the top right left hand corner. Okay, so that's our p vector, and now so we're going to need a width, so we're going to get a float and we're going to go width. Make sure width is in a capitalized, because lowercase, if I do lowercase down here, it's a special function and it comes up pink. We don't want that. We want capital on the W so that we got our own and it doesn't conflict with anything. Alright, so we're going to set that one to 0. So we're just setting up variables. We don't actually need to set that to 0, but we can just in case. And we've got a height now, so put in a height. I'm going to make that one equal to 0. So we've got our position. So say if this is our screen, we've got our position. So if we want to create a button up here, 0, 0, and then our width and our height would make our button. Now we need to go about button of color. So we're going to write color, the American way of spelling color, and then we're going to call ours color because we're in Australia and that's how we write color. Alright, and so that will set when we create our constructor. And then we need now a string. So a string is like a length of text, so more than one character on its own, multiple characters, and this is going to be our text that we're going to have. So we're going to call that variable text. Alright, now we've got our two booleans, which is our true or false statement. So boolean, and one's going to be pressed. See if we press the buttons equal to, we're going to set it to false to begin with, and boolean click, which is going to be when we click, let's call it clicked. So when we clicked our actual button, I'm going to set that one to false. Oops, false as well. There we go. So there are all our variables. So we need a few more variables to create a button. And now we're going to move on to the constructor. So the constructor again is going to be button, and it's got to be spelt the same as our class name. And we're going to open up our brackets. So now we need to put in our temporary variables for when we create a button for the first time and initialize it. So we're going to have int our x position, int our y position, int our width, and int our height. So I'm just using x, y, w, and h because I don't want to write them all out in full. We don't need to write them out in full. We just need them as placeholders. Now we're going to go a string, and it's going to be t. So this is for our text that we want to make our button say. And then we've got int r, int g, and int B, which is our color RGB, all three. So Once we've closed the bracket off, we open up squiggly brackets and we put closing squiggly brackets. Make sure you do that. Now in the middle here, this is where we assign everything to what our temporary variables are. So position.x is our x position from our p vector. I'm going to make it equal to x. There we go. Alright, position dot y is the other part of our p vector, and we're going to make that one equal to y. Alright, now we've got our width. Same again, width is equal to w, and height, just remember that these are capitalized. Height is equal to h. Alright, now we've got our color. So we've got to set up our color. So we've got our variable color is equal to, now instead of just putting in the ints, we're going to actually put it inside a color constructor, and we're going to go R, comma, G, comma, B, close off the bracket, semicolon. So that sets up our color of our button. And last but not least, text is equal to the text. There we go. So we've got our variables and we've got our constructor. So up here, I'm just going to put in a little comment. Constructor to create a button. Awesome. So that's our constructor. We've created our constructor again. We'll use that when we create our button, and we will be doing a test of this just to make sure it does work. So in the next section, we need to do a update and then a render. So in the update now, we've got to think about mouse clicks and mouse presses and whether or not our mouse is clicking in the right spot. So we're going to go void update, and we're going to open up a circle bracket and close the circle bracket, and then put in our squiggly bracket, open and close. Now inside here, we're going to have a bit of code, and we're going to have some if statements. So the first thing we need to do is go if the mouse pressed, is the mouse being pressed, and we've got to see if that's true. If that is true, then we want to do something. But we also want to make sure that it's the correct mouse button. We don't want it to be any old mouse button. We're going to make it and, so we're going to say this has to be true, and mouse button has to be equal to the left one. Left has to be capitalized. Let's just put a space in there. Excellent. And we got one more final thing, and I'll explain why we're doing this. Our Boolean variable pressed is got to be equal to false. Sorry, there we go, false. All right, so that's all the statements we want in here. And what have I missed? I've missed an end. Make sure you don't miss your end. There we go. So we've got mouse pressed is equal to true. If that's true, that's great. And the mouse button has to be the left one, and pressed, our variable has to be false. And see how we set it false up here? So that's true to begin with. All right, open up squiggly brackets, close squiggly brackets. Gonna have to scroll down a little bit. There we go. All right, so inside this if statement, so we're going to say, because we know the mouse is being pressed, we're going to set pressed equal to true. There we go. So we said if it was false, that means the mouse wasn't pressed. Now we know it is pressed by this bit. If that's true, then our mouse has been pressed. And we're just keeping that variable there so we know that that's true at the moment. All right. So what happens if it's what do we need to go on from here? Now we need to figure out, we know the mouse has been pressed and it's been the left mouse button, but we don't know whether we've pressed inside the right part of the screen, which is our square. So it could be our entire screen here, and see this run button, there's probably a little constraint around it saying you've got to be within this space to click. I could click out here, it does nothing. As soon as I click on this, it'll run my program. We're not going to do that at the moment, but so we need to figure out whether we're inside the square. So we know we pressed is true, but we're going to go another if statement inside our other if statement. So see how we're inside these two brackets? Got to stay inside it. We're going to open up a circle bracket. So we need the mouse position now. So mouse X. So that's the X position. That's left and right. We need to make sure that that is greater or equal to our position for our buttons X. So the position for our button X. If that's true, that's good. Second part, and we need this also to be true. Mouse X to be less than or equal to our position dot X plus the width of our button. So it's got to be less than that. So it's got to be within those two areas. So it can't be right on the edge of the screen. It's got to be into wherever our position starts from, and then it has to be within from the other end how wide our button is. So that's our left and right. Now we're going to add another and do our up and down. So it's going to be very similar. I think I spelled, no, I haven't spelled anything wrong yet. Excellent. So we're going to go mouse Y now. So it's got to be greater than or equal to our position dot Y. Yep. And mouse Y has to be less than or equal to our position dot Y plus our height. Height, excellent. So now we've got the height, and now they're our full barriers. So see how we've got full barriers? We've got mouse X is greater than or equal to our position X, and mouse X is less than our position X plus the width. So it's that other end of the, so we've got our left and then our right, and now we've got mouse Y is greater than or equal to our position Y, so that's the top. And we now got the bottom, which is mouse Y is less than or equal to our position Y plus the height. Excellent. So now we've got to open up our squiggly brackets again and closing squiggly brackets for this second if statement. And this is when we know that our actual button's been clicked. So we're going to make our variable clicked equal to true. Yeah, so it's true now. So our button has actually been clicked. Now, that's perfect. So we know that it's been clicked. Now, down here, back down here, so we outside our if statement, we go down to our next if statement, see our very first one. So if the mouse actually was never pressed, then click isn't true. Nothing's been clicked. So we're going to write an else statement here and say, open up a circle bracket, close the circle bracket, and we're going to go clicked is false. The mouse hasn't been pressed, we can't have clicked on anything. So that's false. So we've got our first statement that says mouse is clicked and it's the left one and it's never been pressed before. So if that's not true, if we haven't clicked the mouse, then click can't be true. It's just, no, can't be true. Not going to be true. Alright, so in here, we also need to say that pressed is not true either. Equal to false. So it can't be clicked and it can't be pressed. So that's what we want there inside our update. We don't need anything else inside our update. And so we're just going to leave that alone now. That's all we need in there. We've checked to see if it's been pressed and it's the left mouse button has been pressed and it hasn't been pressed before. And then we're checking to see if it's actually within our button, and if it is, we're setting clicked to being true. So now we're going to move on to actually rendering our button. So under here, just inside of obviously our class ending bracket, but after our closing bracket for our update, we're going to go void render. This is what we want to render to the screen. So now we need to render a square, and we need to render our text on top of that square. So we got to first we got to start with the square. And what color was our square? We need fill, and we have our color for our square. So we're going to put that in there. So this makes anything underneath it that color. Now we need a rectangle, because that's our button. And then we're going to have its X and Y position. So position.x and position.y. And then we need its width. And then we need our height. So you can see how we're using these variables a lot this time. Alright, so we've got a rectangle. But now we need to display some text. So, first of all, we don't want it to be the exact same color as our rectangle, because at the moment we've got our color of our rectangle, then we draw a rectangle. We don't want it to be the same color as our rectangle, we're just going to make it black. And we're going to put 0 in there to get black. So we're going to put another fill. This means everything after this one is going to be black. Alright, now we want to write the text in, but we want to make sure the text goes in the center. So we're going to use something called text align, and the A in align is capitalized. And we're going to go center. Whoops, it's all in uppercase. Center comes up green, and center. There we go. What that does, it just makes it everything aligned in the center of where our position is for our text. And now we actually got to write the text. So we go text, and we get our variable text, which is our capital T text. And now this is where we need our position. So we don't want a button to be the text to display right at the top left-hand corner of our button. We want it to display in the middle. So we need our position .x plus, and with this we're going to open another bracket, the width of our box, half of it. So we get halfway across our box. So we get our position of our box, and we get halfway across our box to get our first location. And then we want to do the same thing with the height. We don't want to be right at the top. We don't want to be right at the bottom. We want to be halfway in between. So we want our position dot y plus our height divided by 2 to get halfway. And then we're going to close off the final circle bracket and put a semicolon in. So as you can see, we've got our text, and then we've got our X position. Our X position is our position of where the box is, and halfway of our width added to it. We don't want the whole width, because that would get us to the other side, halfway, so that's why we divide by 2. And then we've got our position Y, same thing. We want our position Y to get down to where the box starts. Then our height, we don't want to add the whole height to it, we only want to add half the height to it. That way we will hopefully get text in the middle. So we've got our render now. There's only one more thing we need, and this is a statement to check to see if the actual button's being clicked. And we're going to use one of those functions that returns a variable. So we're going to go boolean, and the function is going to be called is clicked, and this is where we are going to return our click. Which is our boolean. So it's either going to be true, clicked. It's either going to be true or false. So when we look at this variable, we can use this inside an if statement. So maybe let's write some comments in now. So this is our function that we use. This in our if statement, there we go, to check if the button has been clicked. So we use this when we use it over in our dodgeball, our main file. Render must be placed, so our render must be placed in void draw in our main function to render the button to the screen. Alright, definitely want to be able to render a button to the screen. And our update also has to run in our void droid to actually get the mouse clicks. So we're going to go must, whoops, I think I deleted one, must be placed in void draw to work. There you go. It just has to be in there, otherwise your button will not be able to be clicked on. And of course we've already got a constructor. So that's our whole button class. Now let's go see if we can actually get it working. So make sure you are saving your work, and we're going to go back to our dodgeball. So we want to create a button now. Alright, so our button is called button, and then we're going to give it a name. We're going to reset button. That's going to be the name of my button. It's going to be a reset button. That's what I'm going to create. And so we've defined that at the top. And now in our setup underneath our timer, because we've still got our timer in there from the last time, which is good because we're going to use it in a second. We're going to go reset button is equal to a new button. Alright, this is where we use our constructor. What was in our constructor again? Let's scroll up. Let's go looking for our constructor. We've got X and Y position, width, height, string, which is the text, and then our RGB for our color. So X, we're going to put it at 10, 100. Let's go 100, position 100, 100. Our button is going to be, how wide is our button going to be? Our button is going to be 100 wide, and the width of our button is going to be 50. And now what do we need? Oh, what was the next thing in our button? We got X, Y, width, height, string. Alright, this is how we write a string. Put in our quotation marks, and we are going to write this as reset. Reset, and close our quotation marks. Should come up purple. Alright, and then comma. So that's our text, and now we need our color for our button. I'm going to go a nice bluish color. So we're going to go 0, 200, 200, and close our bracket and put a semicolon at the end. So that's initialized our button. It's going to be at 100, 100. That's our position. It's going to be 100 wide, 50 down. It's going to have a text in the middle of it saying reset, and it's going to be a nice bluey color because of our RGB values. Alright, next what we need to do is we need to actually display this to the screen. So in our draw, we're going to display this to our screen. So underneath our text, make sure we're underneath our background. We're going to type our variable name, and we're going to go dot update because that updates the button, and we're going to reset button dot render our button to the screen. So let's just see now what it does. Let's run our program. All right, awesome. We have got a box. It's 100, 100, 100 in, and then it's 100 wide and 50 down. We've got reset in the middle, and we can click on it, but it doesn't do anything yet. So this is where we need to use our is it clicked inside an if statement, and if it is clicked, we want it to do something. So we're going to do something next with that. All right. So just above here, we're going to put some spaces in. All right, we're going to put an if statement. So we're actually going to use our button if reset button dot is clicked. So that's our function that tells us if it's being clicked. That's a true or false. It's either true or not true. True or false. So if it is true, we want it to do something. And I'm going to reset my timer from our last tutorial. I'm going to go timer, time. Sorry, what did I call it? Oh, I called it start timer. And we're going to set it to, let's set it to 10. Set time to 10. So we're going to go open bracket and we want 10 seconds in there. And we're going to close that off. So now what should happen is if we click on our button, our timer in that top left hand corner should change to 10. Alright, let's see what happens. Run our program. So if I click anywhere on the screen, I'm clicking at the moment, it's not doing anything. As soon as I put my mouse inside there and I click, oh look at that, our time reset back to 10 every time we click on it. So like if I hold my mouse down, we get it gets stuck, it stops. Oh, that's not a good thing. Probably don't want that to happen. So we might gonna have to go fix that in a second. Alright, so if we click on it, it'll reset it. But it gets stuck if we hold it down. Alright, that's not a very good button at the moment. So let's go fix that. But our button's working. Our button's working out. Sorta should be. Alright, so I'm going to close that down. We're going to go back into our button. Something's wrong with our code. So we're going to have to add a little bit to our update code so it doesn't just continuously stop. And what it is, we're going to say when the mouse is not pressed, that we change clicked to pressed to false. So instead of putting it in here, I'm actually going to remove it out of here. And I'm going to add it underneath. So we're going to have another if statement. Oh no, third if statement. We'll get another one. If mouse pressed is, this is how we do not true. Not true. Okay. Not true. Open squiggly bracket, close squiggly bracket. We're going to put our press is equal to false inside that. Oops, I made a mistake. That's meant to be an equal sign. So if mouse is not true, mouse press is not true, then the press is false. Alright, let's see what happens now. Run our code. Now if we click on our button, it resets it. But if I hold my mouse down over the reset, it doesn't continuously reset it. So now it's only when we click it. We actually have to click on it to get our mouse button to reset. And if I click anywhere else, oh, look at that, it doesn't reset it. As soon as I click on the actual button, there we go, it resets our timer to 10, and our timer's counting up at the moment. So we've just created a button that we can click on and we actually got it to do something. So that if statement that says if it's clicked, we can do something. You can now create multiple buttons and have those if statements saying different things. Maybe we want to change it, so if we click this button it goes 10 seconds. We could create another button that if we click on it, it goes for 50 seconds, starts at 50 seconds. Alright, that's it for this tutorial on how to create a button. So you've got all your code there, and hopefully everything works. Excellent.